Our speaker today is Steve Box, who's the Executive Director of Environmental Stewardship. And Steve, I can just cycle through the slides.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Okay,
Certainly
over to
fine.
you, Steve.
So yeah, I'm Steve Box. I'm the Executive Director of Environmental Stewardship organizations, nonprofit 501c3 that I founded back in 2007. Our purpose is to protect and enhance the natural resources in order to meet current needs of the environment and of humans, and to use scientific information to restore and sustain ecological systems. That's our science approach. And then to provide education outreach to encourage good stewardship of our natural resources. And you're going to see examples of all of these three as we go through this presentation. The fact that we're, doing this presentation is outreach and education, and you'll see the others. So the vision for Water Future is that we ensure that a publicly informed process is there, that we provide for the needs of the local counties, meaning our local counties, not all the counties in the country or in the state, provide base flows for the rivers, streams, and springs. You'll notice our focus is mostly environmental. We don't try to get too much into the human aspects, but we need, we're mindful of those because we have to balance between those. We'd like to maximize the recharge of both our river and our groundwater resources, and to the extent possible, provide export of water to other counties. And that's a big bone of contention with a lot. Next slide, please. So our major focus is this intersection between the Carrizo-Wilcox Major Aquifer Group and the Brazos River, which runs through Milam and Robertson counties, and the Colorado River, which runs through Bastrop and Lee counties. That's our local focus. Next. And I'd just like to say, as we go through this, if people have questions, we might as well answer them as we go through. But so what we're...
Yeah, does the aquifer run along the... never mind. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can get... So what we'll cover is the Texas water laws, regional planning, groundwater planning management, surface water planning management, environmental flows, and current projects that we're involved in and what's next. So next slide. So under the groundwater and surface water law, there's two different sets of laws that apply. Surface water is really owned by the state and regulated by the TCEQ, or the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And they issue water rights, which are basically permits that are on a priority date basis. And that's who gets to take water out of the river when, particularly during a drought or when there's not enough water available. First, the oldest senior right gets to take the water first, and junior rights have to let it pass. Groundwater, on the other hand, is based on English common law, and it's regulated by groundwater conservation districts. And they're assisted by Texas Water Development Board, and well permits and desired future conditions come under this. And this is basically an extension of the rule of capture, where under a groundwater district, where there is a groundwater district, it's kind of a modified rule of capture because there are limitations on how much can be pumped, how close you can put your wells to other wells, and those types of things. So it's a very important, and we're glad that we have one. Anyhow, the state of Texas does not formally in law recognize groundwater and surface water interactions, which was one of the problems that environmental stewardship decided to start facing several years ago by building a bridge, a science bridge between the laws and what we see as the actual situation on the ground. Next slide, please. So it's a complex process whenever you think about all the things that go on in water planning in Texas. Not only do we have that surface water law and the groundwater law, we have regional planning. This is under Senate Bill 1 back in 1997. It too is managed by the Water Development Board. They went from a centralized planning to a localized bottom-up planning process back in that time. It's based upon the drought of record, which used to be the drought of 1950s. The more recent drought of record is our 2010 to 2015 drought. You may remember that one quite well. It's based upon stakeholder groups that represent different stakeholder in this process. They plan the supply and demand, thinking both of groundwater and surface water, but they do not implement those programs. The counties, the cities, and the water suppliers and private entities are the ones that actually implement these programs. They provide a planning. They develop strategies that must be recommended in the plan to get state funding. And ultimately, this is what rolls up into our state water plan. So I'll go to the next one. Next slide. So we in Bastrop County sit in Region K planning group, which runs along the Colorado River. And it's basically known as the Colorado River Regional Water Planning Group. And that, you can see where that is. That's on the left side of the slide. The right side of the slide is the group just to the north and east of us. And that is Region G, the Brazos Regional Water Planning Group. And you can see there what kind of counties they cover. So it's a lot of counties and it's a lot of interest, in these planning groups. So go to the next slide, please. So the group below us, up one. There you go. The group below us is Region L. So that's, and you notice this red streak that runs through all of these. That is the Carrizo-Wilcox Aquifer group that runs from lower west side of Texas to the upper northeast side of Texas. Next slide. So groundwater management areas, they are multiple groundwater conservation districts that are over a portion of an aquifer or an entire aquifer, so that they are planning for that entire aquifer unit. Their major function is to plan what are called desired future conditions. And that is, what do you want this aquifer to look like, and what do you want it to be doing, and how it's performing 50 years out. So it's a 50-year planning cycle, and it's on a 5-year rolling basis. And so in our region, well, actually throughout the state, we are now in the third 5-year round of this planning process. These desired future conditions have to be physically possible, and they have to be compatible throughout the districts that are in that group. From that, we get, once they decide on a desired future condition, the Texas Water Development Board builds what's called a model available groundwater. So they're looking at how much, with these DFCs, how much water on a quantitative basis should be available to each of the districts and each of the counties on a rolling basis throughout that 50-year planning cycle. And then they give that's the number that they give to those Region K, Region L, and Region G planning groups, so that they can start saying, well, this is how much money we should have available in the future. And there are, this I forgot to update this part of the slide. There was a petition process that you could do at the end of a desired future condition to challenge the condition if you didn't think it was what they call reasonable. And environmental stewardship did challenge the very first GMA 12 plans. It's managed by Texas Water Development Board, and then there's another challenge process that you can go through with TCEQ on groundwater district rules. This has now been modified such that you go, instead of going through these these challenges, you go through an actual contested case hearing, which is a much more sophisticated legal process to really have, and it's held in front of administrative law judges. And this is a process like we've just gone through with several of the permits in Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District. Those will come up later.
Dave,
So
is that
next
a
slide.
scenario where there's little guys like us and you versus the guys who have humongous profit motive?
Is that what?
Is this a process where it's good guys like you and ordinary people versus the guys who want to make a bunch of money profit on their water?
Well, it can be for good guys like us. And it also now is, I'm going to talk about it a little later, also available to landowners. Now, the key difference is big guys have lots and lots of money, and we don't have lots and lots of money. So we have to figure out how to put on a desired or a contested case hearing to bring our case before these hearing groups and pay for it. And that's you know, we've so far spent about $70,000 on this LCRA hearing. So
I got a note from Sarah Eckhart, and this water thing is some more than passing interest to her. So
yeah,
how it goes.
We're familiar with Sarah. Thank you. Next slide. This is the Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District is basically Bastrop and Lee counties. It covers the Carrizo, Wilcox, the Queen City, the Sparta, and the Colorado alluvium aquifers. They are a member of GMA 12. They also are members of Region G on Bastrop County and Region, K for Bastrop County and G for Lee County. And they are the target of the water marketers that we're kind of talking about today. NDOP, which is now Recharge, was one of the first water marketers to apply. 4-Star came after they did. LCRA came after they did for their Gideon's power. The Bastrop County Lost Pines power plant wells, and then there are others. So far, both 4-Star, NDOP, and those LCRAs have been permitted in this group. Another one I put on this list is Blue Water Vista Ridge. They're actually in the Post Oak Savannah Groundwater Conservation District. They are the ones that are responsible for about 50,000 acre feet of water a year that is being pumped out of Burleson County and going to San Antonio. And that pumping has just started recently, and this is a bone of contention, you might say, amongst some of the landowners and others. We'll get into that a little bit more later. Next slide. So surface waters are regulated by the TCEQ. Like I said earlier, they grant water rights. They approve the LCRA water management plan. They approve emergency orders, which are important because in the last drought, LCRA asked for several emergency exemptions from having to provide water to farmers, the rice farmers downstream, and to the environment, both the in-stream flows and Matagorda Bay. The Lower Colorado River Authority then administers these the water. They're involved with the Highland Lakes in the lower basin. They have a water management plan. They own the majority of the water rights in the basin, and then they sell that off as what they call firm water. And they serve on the Region K Water Planning Group. Then one probably most people don't even know about is there is an Upper Colorado River Authority that is way out there in West Texas that's beyond the LCRA's territory. But importantly, it is still a Colorado River drainage basin, and we've seen impacts from that over the years, and I'll show you something on that later. Next slide. So surface waters, there's a whole thing about environmental flows that were in Senate Bill 3 back in legislation in 2007. Once again, this is managed by TCEQ. The way Senate Bill 3 worked is they set up what are called Bay and Basin area stakeholder committees throughout the state to to recommend environmental flows that are needed to protect the rivers and the lakes and streams and the bays. Our BBASC is the simple name we put on it, is the Colorado and Lavaca River and Matagorda and Lavaca Bay Area Stakeholder Committee. That's a mouthful. Interesting, this is a group of stakeholders, and you can see the different stakeholder groups here that are represented. And I bolded 3 of those because we have, environmental stewardship has been able to get us local representation on this board for those 3. The free range livestock is Patty Jacobs, who is with Bastrop Cattle Company. The regional water user is Jamie Smith Hanchey with Rising Phoenix Adventures. And then the environmental one is myself for environmental stewardship.
Levi,
So,
just as a data point, we have, you know, we have to be more or less done by 1 o'clock.
okay. So we have a science team, and this was adopted in 2011. Go to the next one then. The point of the environmental flows is to maintain the biological soundness of the state's rivers, lakes, bays, and estuaries, which the legislature said was of great importance to the public economic health and general welfare, basically a sound ecological environment, and to provide these freshwater flows necessary to maintain the viability of the state. So let's go to the next one. To give you an idea what this means at Bastrop gauge, the minimum subsistence flow to get through a drought is around 120 to 180 cubic feet per second. Back in September 14th of 2013, in the last drought, we got down to 128 cubic feet per second, really beginning to start coming to the bottom of that. About 30 to 40% of that water is actually contributed by groundwater, and the Highland Lakes contribute around 38%. And then there are return flows. Freshwaters to the bay, Matagorda Bay is about 14,500 acre feet per month. Let's go to the next slide, because this brings into highlight what this environmental flow thing is all about in some respects, and why we've got some problems going forward. These are recent inflows to the Highland Lakes for this year. The kind of bluish green is the average from 1942 to 2019. That is the average since the drought of record. You look at the orange, and that is 2020, and then that black is what we had during the last drought period. And you can look and see that our inflows to the Highland Lakes are running well below what they ever have been. And that means that the waters in the Highland Lakes aren't guaranteed, and that means flows in the Colorado River and the lower basin aren't guaranteed. Let's go to the next slide then. So basically, environmental flows are in the LCRA water management plan, and it's Highland Lakes versus the rice farmers. The river flows were cut off in 2011, like I mentioned earlier. Matagorda Bay was cut off in 2011 drought. The groundwater surface water relationship is the relationship between the Colorado River and the aquifers, which currently is a gaining relationship, meaning that the river receives water from the aquifers as it passes through the Bastrop Reach. It's predicted to become a losing river as a result of groundwater over pumping, surface water over allocation, and what might happen in the future with future reuse. Let's go to the next one. So what do we mean by gaining and losing is, if you can, I don't have a pointer, but if you can look at the slide, the river basin on the left, right there, yes, you can see just down just a bit, you can see that the water is flowing into the river from the aquifers. If you go to the right one, you can see that the water is flowing out of the river and into the aquifers. So the historic perspective has been that the Colorado River has been gaining water from the aquifers, and that as a result of the pumping, groundwater pumping particularly, and over allocation during a drought, particularly the situation in the right is what we anticipate and what the models predict we will have in the future. So let's go to the next slide, please. This is really the 20,000, 30,000 foot view of what's going on. This is a slide that is what is a prediction from our what's called a groundwater availability model. And we have a new model that just went into effect recently after hundreds of thousands of dollars and lots of time and argument to get the darn thing updated. So what the new one, the long part that you see to the left, the flat, kind of flat numbers up and down, is what's called the historic period, and that's the calibration period. Then you can see around 1990, things started moving downward, and that's when the development period started. And then more recently, you can see where that red line starts and the blue line go on out to the right. Those are the predictions into the future based upon the current groundwater pumping. And the blue line represents what our current desired future conditions predict. And the red line indicates what the current thinking is with respect to the desired future conditions that are about to be accepted. So we're heading into that losing stream aspect. The next slide. Real quickly, this is basically some of the tributaries in Bastrop County and how they are predicted to perform in the future. So you can see they're going the same direction. Move to the next one. So environmental stewardship is recently.
I'm going to share Steve's slides.
What's that?
I'm going to share your slides as a PDF form to a member. So there's a lot of information here,
right.
But I'm going to share it after.
Right. And I'm going to try to move through these a little, not get into all the detail because you are sharing them. So this planning process of the groundwater management area 12 is where we are now. We just in the last month have made requests to the GMA, specifically environmental stewardship, that we need to monitor the impacts of groundwater pumping on the mainstream of the Colorado River and its tributaries. They need to do some technical work called hydrographic separations. We need to establish a desired future condition component that is protective of the surface waters that go into what the normal planning has been done over the years. Go to the next slide. We also need to initiate the development of desired future conditions for the Colorado River alluvium. It's not one of the ones that we have that on right now. And we need to seek to also develop criteria to evaluate the impacts of reduced flows on groundwater base flows into the river and determine when those become unreasonable. These are issues that have come up in the recent hearing with LCRA. So let's flip to the next one. This is just a set of specifics of what we'd like to have on the Bastrop gauge. I showed you some of the figures on the Bastrop gauge back there, and they would apply to the Carrizo, Calvert Bluff, Simsboro, and Hooper aquifers, not to all the others. Next slide. So we're also requesting that desired future conditions be developed for the Colorado River alluvium. And I'll show you the next slide. Oops, I guess he went off. So this is a map of the Colorado River alluvium, and the groundwater management, groundwater modeling for this region will cover Bastrop and Fayette counties. It won't cover the counties below there, but that is the alluvial aquifer. Let's skip the next slide and go to the next one. Nope, one up. Nope, one down. That one, yeah, okay. So let's talk about the LCRA's groundwater permit real quickly. They're asking for 25,000 acre feet per year from the Simsboro formation. Environmental stewardship, 43 landowners and some others have opposed that. The landowners were granted party status as a result of the work that environmental stewards and landowners and others have done over this to be able to get them to be able to be parties. That we contested the fact that they weren't allowed party status in the NDOT hearing, and Judge Carson Campbell of Bastrop District Court ruled in favor of us and the landowners. There was a hearing held in October of last year, started in Bastrop and ended up in Austin County before the State Office of Administrative Hearing. And two administrative law judges listened to this and made judgments on this hearing. They issued a proposal for decision, forget the exact date on it, not too long, about 6 months ago. So right now, this whole thing is pending before the Lost Pines Board of Directors. Because of COVID concerns, we haven't had the final hearing that we need to have, and we're not sure when that's going to happen now. The Board of Directors will make a final decision on the information that's provided, and the decision is likely to be appealed. So let's go to the next slide.
Steve?
Yep.
Some of us don't 100% get a good quantitative feel. We had a program by the general manager of Aqua Water. And to put in perspective, as I recall, he said some number and had one of our club members stand up, and she was like 5 feet tall, and said, okay, this is like a pump 5 feet tall, pumping water 24/7, some number like that.
Oh yeah. It's huge. These are huge numbers. And I didn't want to kind of get too much into the number, but they're massive amounts of water that are being moved through this process. So anyhow, this is a graph that was used in the hearing that was generated by the new groundwater, groundwater model. And once again, that first black part is the calibration period. You can see in the 1990s, when the pumping development period started dropping down, and the purplish color is the current desired future conditions that we have. And with the LCRA's request, that red line would be the impact of LCRA's pumping on our aquifers, which, as you can see, drives us into the losing range. Let's look at the next slide, please. This takes LCRA's permit, which has not been permitted yet, and adds it, just by my loose hand drawing, to that slide that you saw earlier. That is, the blue is our current DFCs, the red is what's being proposed at this point. And if LCRA were permitted, then you can see that they further drive us into that negative territory where the river becomes a losing stream. And there's a whole lot of ecological repercussions that come along with that losing stream aspects that we won't get into right now. So the next slide, please. So the judge made some key findings for the environment. I'm not going to go through all their findings, but the main findings were that the LCRA groundwater pumping permit should require the state agency, LCRA, to monitor surface waters, and that they agreed with us that the surface waters could be significantly lowered as a result of this pumping, and flow of the river could drop below necessary levels to maintain the ecological functions. And the tributaries could also actually dry up sooner during drought conditions. So once again, the Lost Pines District rule should have the LCRA monitoring impacts. It also says the district's approach was not adequate to prevent unreasonable impacts to surface waters, and that they needed to set up in their management plan a surface water monitoring requirement in that plan, in order that the district could take discretionary powers to curtail all users if necessary. And that the proposed permit should include the right for the well owners and landowners to participate in the rest of this process. So, next slide. So this is the last slide. What's next? I want to invite you all to attend, if you wish, by virtual or video, the December 16th Lost Pines Groundwater Conservation District meeting, which is tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock. Reason being, we have recharge on there. What used to be NDOT, they're requesting an amendment to extend their permit to March 9th of 2023, which is set to really expire next month. 4-star permit is being transferred to Gatehouse Water, and they're requesting a renewal of their permit. There's a lot of controversy and a lot of confusion about what's going on there, and it's not well understood. The other thing that's going to be on the meeting is to establish a well monitoring committee to study the impacts of Vista Ridge pumping on domestic well owners in Lee County. The reason for that is their domestic wells are running dry in Lee County right now. And that pumping only started earlier this year, but it's 50,000 acre-feet of water per year going to San Antonio for the next 30 years. So, and the final item on the agenda for that is to consider a date for the final hearing of the LCRA permit.
One small point that Steve mentioned was the idea of registering your wells. So we have out at our farm and ranch, we have about a half a dozen wells. So I've registered the first 2, and there are benefits. So I'd encourage anyone with wells that cares about water to at least consider that. Take one little takeaway from this pitch.
Yeah, thanks, Norm. I had that on there and I almost skipped over it. And yes, this is a good example where when these wells start running dry out there in Lee County, first thing the district says is, well, is it a registered well? Do I really give a darn? And if your well is not registered, then it's kind of like, oh, well, but if it's registered, then at least, you know, you've got a dog in the hunt. And the district knows that you have a dog in the hunt. So the other part is the GMAG 12 process, which I've just discussed, of future conditions. They will propose desired future conditions by sometime in May. That begins a 90-day process where there will be public comment. Those DFCs will come to each one of the 12 or each one of the 5 districts in GMA 12. Lost Pines will be one of them. The Lost Pines will have to hold a hearing about those, and we'll be informing you about when those come up. Ultimately, they have to adopt new DFCs by 2021 and send it to the Texas Water Development Board for approval. The last 2 items on this is the question, are we moving into a new drought right now? All the indications are that we're about ready to see a new repeat of the drought, the new drought of record in 2011. And of course, the legislative session is coming up, and that always holds a lot of fun and games. So that is my presentation. I have provided Norm with the details about the Lost Pines meeting tomorrow night. If you want to join, he can send you that information, along with a link to the SAWDF, Simsboro Aquifer Water Defense Fund's website that will give you a whole lot more detail about what's going on in Lost Pines with these issues that have been just raised.
2 more.
So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you all today. Thank you.
2 more details about registering the well, because some of this stuff is to some extent beyond your control. As I understand, with the well registration, you have at least have some hope, and they can actually come out and assess it. So
yes,
at time X, the water table was 50 feet below the ground, and at time Y, it was 75.
right.
That's
and then one of the advantages is that you can do that yourself, and you should do that yourself. We'd encourage that. But the other advantage is that then they have come out and read it. You're not getting into a debate about what did it really say. It's they did the reading. The other thing that's coming up and I think it's being discussed on these wells in Lee County that are going dry is whether or not the district might be encouraged to put some funds towards more measurement of these and perhaps even installing some automatic measuring devices on some of these wells. More monitoring wells.
I'll send along the link along with your presentations. It's a painless process. They're looking for the lat longs of your well, and it's a good thing. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Steve. By the way, Steve used to be a member of our club until we decided to move to the coast.
Yep. I'm still there in my heart and mind.
Does anyone else have any questions? Well, thank you. I'll send out the slides in a PDF form. And reminder, we're looking for nominations for club officers. And if there's no other discussion, we have the four-way test, excuse me. First, is it first?
Is it the truth?
Second,
Is it fair to all concerned?
fair to all concerned. Third,
Will it build goodwill and better friendships?
and fourth.
Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Thank you. Bye.
The end of every